Now, the reason this specific outline is relevant today, I just discovered after the shot, which you didn't make it actually because it was supposed to be the other eye. It's because the original outline was dated for January 23rd of 2019, which would have been the day of the date of the response from the Supreme Court of the United States a year later. 1 year after the date of this outline was the date of the letter from the Supreme Court of the United States saying what it did about my attempt to request a filing for articles of impeachment against the United States Senate. Then I have a note updated regarding November 3rd, specifically about an understanding I had that I wanted there to be no misrepresentation of what me trying to do in this, having a connection with the Department of Defense Afghanistan strategy. Even though once I found it, I realized there were correlations between what were considered to be tactical objectives as well as what I was trying to focus on, just for a different intent, which is absolutely why today would be relevant. Of course, I only know that today, right? But I'm just going to give a quick rundown of some factors here. And before you go deporting anybody, understand you've already got a group of deportees that we have still not gotten appropriate identification on, gotten appropriate understanding of the grounds for which it was justified deporting them, and all of the communications them or anybody in their family have had with any member of Congress, the Senate, or anybody in the executive branch in connection with their deportations has yet to be provided. So don't be thinking that you're going to be creating some sort of disturbance in order to alter the local or domestic socio-political paradigm in order to obstruct whatever the impact is of following up on this at this time, right? That's not acceptable. By the way, I believe it is 422 in California, if that makes a difference. But in response to this, there are a couple of things I did not have any anticipation of at the time. I did not know that what is identified as COVID 19 specifically was on the radar at the time I made this in the beginning of 2019, in addition to other things that were going on. I did know that by that time I had already spent 3 years being refused any assistance personally, sensibly because there was an election campaign going on. And when I first made request that people interested in the situation in Honduras investigate domestic energy deals that may have correlations with certain kinds of factors, including in connection with the green energy initiatives, but also specifically with so called renewable energy projects such as hydroelectric or wind or even solar. I was told that it was not appropriate to make the kind of request I was making at that time because there was an election campaign going on and my requests were blocked. I was pretty much blacklisted from the group I was engaged with at that time because I was told it was a form of election interference. Um, Even though they didn't use that words, they said that by virtue of being a 501c3, that they could not take a stance on advocating for or against a political candidate, so it was not appropriate for them to allow posting of information asking about potential conflicts of interest regarding somebody that had previously been in a cabinet position but was at that time running for the president of the United States. It didn't make sense to me. It had no legal basis. But what it did serve to do was cut off any chance I had of connecting with people that claim to be involved with energy policy and or claim to be involved with cross-border solidarity around other kinds of issues so that we could focus on projects within the United States specifically identified as green energy projects that may have connections with financing or other kinds of interest that may have heightened the kind of risk that people in other countries were exposed to up to and including acts of political assassination. So I've been doing my own thing, and part of what I've been putting in my blogs and what I've been putting online, and part of what my campaign is about, is addressing these factors directly. And now, while I have a much more firsthand experience specifically with the gas and oil industry, what I understand is going on right now is that part of what is going on with this transition in the gas and oil industry, the domestic gas and oil industry specifically, is a paradigm whereby I believe certain countries that had national gas and oil sectors are being engineered into a form of compelled and forced privatization, specifically Venezuela, but not exclusively Venezuela. Something similar is happening in Brazil, and something similar is happening with other countries that are addressing factors connected to OPEC and OPEC Plus, in addition to the things that have been going on for the last 20 to 25 years. Additionally, there's been a very significant paradigm that is ongoing in Iraq. I believe now that part of what happened in Iraq is that for the first 10 to 15 years of the American occupation of Iraq, that primarily American gas and oil companies were allowed to go in and set the terms of what the paradigm was allowed to be in Iraq, based primarily on a model that had been ongoing in Texas for a considerable amount of time, including the manners in which the Texas petrochem sector engages in biological, chemical, and other kinds of weapons, and or uses derivatives connected to the healthcare sector. And that they went into Iraq and they set up a paradigm. And then after a certain amount of time, there was supposed to be an opening up of various oil fields to certain international companies in order to create their own kind of version of that paradigm. And that part of what ended up happening is that the kind of model that the primarily Texas gas and oil sector, but the kind of systematology of the Texas gas and oil sector was trying to put into Iraq ended up being exposed to other countries that may or may not have had their own understanding of what to do, and that for the last couple of years that Iran and Russia were trying to do something comparable in Syria, and that a lot of the characterizations between what Russian interests were in Syria versus what Iran's interests were in Syria actually, I followed this for over a year and a half, fell along the same lines of the kind of pairing of the gas and oil sector that was responsible for a particular kind of fixed asset development that also had to do with national defense, and then healthcare or humanitarian assistance or disaster assistance that was taken over by another sector where they were supposed to work together or weave together. And while this is happening, there's other parts of the world that are taking a much different approach when it comes to these allegations or these alleged green energy factors. And one of the things that I had learned was that the windmill sector and the wind sector was one that was particularly of alarm to me, because I believe that they were pairing the development of certain kinds of technologies and actual fixed assets, the actual, for instance, windmill itself, and the techniques that go into creating and maintaining these windmills, with various kinds of techniques that are used in alleged medical treatment, including the kinds of medical treatment that can biophysiologically impact somebody in what could otherwise be identified as a form of cybernetic enhancement, but are not engaging people consciously and are then putting people into programs or treatment regimens that are serving to actually automate certain functionalities without their conscious engagement, and with a characterization of being disabled or being debilitated on a particular level. And I think, going back, that given my understanding of a certain element of the business sector in Honduras, including one that has all the different kinds of associations, that there was a high level of cognizance of these capabilities and a high level of consciousness about their potential application and implementation, and that there was a willing conspiracy to aid and abet this kind of medicalization of the world, as opposed to directly engaging with it with concepts of engineering and with concepts of cybersecurity in ways and manners that other countries wanted, including countries that were allowed to be characterized as enemies of the United States. And that there's a part of long-term paradigms that for a long time had been at the sort of cultural epicenter of a lot of what was going on during the Cold War, and a lot of what was going on in terms of countries strategically and politically around the world, deciding how that they would respond to the United States versus how they would respond to the Soviet Union in terms of paradigms for social development. The concepts of capitalism and communism that attended with that had as much to do with access of the means of tangible material production as they did with an understanding of the conscious engagement of one's intangible property and intellectual capacities to participate in the development of the infrastructure for society. And I think that this is a huge cultural thing that actually has very literal implications, and that's part and part of what we're dealing with right now. So I'm following up on this today because I just now have become consciously aware that the payment is supposed to be meted out when? September 23rd? Okay. And unfortunately, my concern is that there's going to be a terrorist attack on November 3rd, right? I see. Okay. All right. And